There are silences that echo louder than words. When you choose to walk away, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in stillness, something profound begins to unfold. You don't just create absence, you awaken shadows. Carl Jung taught that what we withdraw from doesn't vanish, it transforms. And your quiet departure becomes a mirror for others, reflecting what they've refused to see in themselves. In this video, you'll understand why stepping away holds more power than presence, and how this single act exposes the truth of most human connections. If you've ever walked away or thought about it, stay, because this journey won't just explain their reaction, it might free you from it. Most don't realize how deeply they depended on the idea of you, not the real you, the version they crafted in their minds, stitched from needs, fears, and hidden longings. You were never just a person, you were a projection. And the moment you step back, their narrative fractures. What was once comfort becomes chaos. This is the unsettling truth. Your presence held their structure together. And when you release that thread, even gently, their world wobbles. Not because of love, but because of dependency. Not because you were essential, but because they were leaning on something fragile, and now it's gone. The illusion shatters, and what's left is raw. But why does this shake them so deeply? Because your exit isn't just physical. It's symbolic. It represents freedom, the kind they crave but fear. And watching someone choose wholeness over attachment forces them to confront what they've been avoiding, their own incompleteness. And that's just the beginning, because every step you take away from their orbit sends tremors through the emotional architecture they never dared to question. You're not walking away from them. You're walking toward yourself, and that truth, it's unbearable for those who never learned to stand alone. When you disappear from their daily rhythm, what truly vanishes isn't your voice or your presence, it's the reflection. You were the mirror where they projected not just affection but their deepest insecurities. Jung called it the shadow, the parts of the psyche we deny but unconsciously hand over to others to carry. And you carried more than they ever admitted. Without you, they no longer know where to place that weight. The guilt, the unspoken fears, the need for validation, they have nowhere to go now. So they circle your absence like a storm, not because they miss you, but because they're missing parts of themselves they once saw in you. They say things like, "You were important, we needed you." But listen closely, those words often aren't about love. They're cries for stability, for control, for familiarity. You were the scaffolding. And now they must face a terrifying question. Who am I without this person to lean on? That's why walking away holds so much power. It forces a reckoning. Suddenly, they must face the emotional architecture of their own inner world. And most people aren't ready for that confrontation. It's not just pain they feel, it's the unraveling of a story they didn't realize they were telling themselves. And here's the paradox. The one who leaves carries the guilt, but the ones left behind carry the reflection. They stare into the void you created, and it starts talking back, not with words, but with truths. Uncomfortable, undeniable truths. There's something curious about distance. At first, they convince themselves it's temporary, a phase, a pause. They fill the gap with noise, distractions, rehearsed indifference. But underneath, the void begins to whisper. And what it says isn't about you, it's about them, about what they can't control, can't fix, can't understand. The most spiritual truths often arrive in disguise. You attract what you are, not what you want. And your absence becomes a magnet for their unhealed wounds. Suddenly they feel emotions they can't explain, irritation, sadness, even resentment. But none of it is clean. It's tangled in the shadow. Some will turn you into a villain. Others will sanctify you, pretending you were perfect. But both extremes serve one purpose: avoiding the truth. If they can label you, they don't have to examine themselves. If they can blame you, they don't have to wonder what part of them depended too much on your light. It's not your silence that hurts them. It's what your silence reveals. People fear stillness not because it's empty, but because it's honest. And when you step away, you remove the filter. The dynamic shifts. They no longer get to decide who you are. They're left with who they are without you. And this is where the first internal fracture begins. Because when someone no longer has you to reflect off of, they must finally look inward. And what they find there often shakes them more than your departure ever could. Time passes, but the echo of your absence grows louder. At first, they try to fill the space with routine, conversations, work, laughter. But none of it lands the same. Because what you took with you wasn't just your presence, it was a version of themselves they only recognized through you. Without that, something internal begins to dissolve. Slowly, quietly, but undeniably. The illusion of control vanishes, and in its place a hollow awareness begins to bloom. They start to question everything. Did I take them for granted? Was I too much? But these aren't real questions, they're survival mechanisms. Because if they admit they relied on you emotionally, the entire narrative of who they believe themselves to be starts to collapse. They thought they were independent, whole. But now, a deeper truth seeps in. Much of their identity was wrapped around your energy. You weren't just someone in their life, you were the framework. Jung said that people don't see others as they are, but as projections of their own inner world. And so, when you exit, what you truly destroy is the mirror. Not with violence, but with silence. Not with anger, but with presence. And in doing so, you force others to see what the mirror was hiding all along: unmet needs, emotional dependence, and fragile self-concepts. You didn't break them. You exposed the cracks that were always there. And this is why your absence becomes unbearable. Not because of who you were to them, but because of who they can no longer pretend to be in your presence. That's the true rupture. You pulled away the veil. You stopped playing the role. You stopped allowing the projection. And now they are left with themselves, not the version they perform, the real, unfiltered core. And for many, that's a stranger. It's here that the emotional chaos begins. Some spiral into anger, others into nostalgia. But beneath every emotion lies one silent truth. Your decision to step away disrupted a system they were unconsciously invested in. You didn't just walk away, you removed the scaffolding. And now they must stand alone, or fall. And in that delicate imbalance, the soul begins to tremble. They say they're fine, that they've moved on. But the truth lives in subtleties, in the way they glance at old photos, in the hesitation before speaking your name, in the tension they try to hide when someone else mentions you. The psyche remembers what the ego tries to forget, and in their silence, a storm brews. Because the absence of someone who mirrored them so clearly leaves not just emptiness, it leaves disorientation. Some begin to romanticize you, turning your memory into a sanctuary. Others build walls of resentment, convincing themselves that your leaving was betrayal. But neither of these responses is about you. They're attempts to make sense of the emotional earthquake you triggered, because in your silence, they must invent reasons. And in those invented stories, they try to reclaim control over something that deeply destabilized them. Here's a deeper truth. Your departure wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror crashing to the ground. Every shard reflects something they didn't want to see. And while they may blame you, the discomfort runs deeper. It's the discomfort of seeing themselves without a mask, of confronting emotional needs they spent years denying. Jung would call this confronting the shadow, and few are ready for that reckoning. Now I want you to do something powerful. Write this in the comments. My silence speaks louder than their expectations. Writing it is more than expression, it's manifestation. It is taught that the written word is the first physical imprint of belief. When you write it, you claim the energy of clarity, of sovereignty, of inner strength. You make the invisible real. Let this be your line in the sand. Your quiet declaration, because the world may never understand why you walked away, but you will always know it was the beginning of your return to self. And nothing is more sacred than that. What's most revealing isn't how people react immediately after you walk away. It's how their story about you changes over time. At first, they may pretend not to care, but the mind doesn't let go so easily, especially when your presence was part of their emotional architecture. Slowly, they begin rewriting the narrative, not to understand you, but to protect themselves from what your absence forces them to face. Some will say, they were never really there for me. Others will whisper, I never truly mattered to them. But those words don't come from clarity. They come from confusion, from the ache of disconnection. It's easier to alter the story than to admit emotional dependence. Because admitting that someone else's presence shaped your stability is terrifying. It shatters the illusion of self-sufficiency, and yet that illusion must fall, because it was never true independence. It was adaptation. People often shape themselves around the ones they rely on without realizing it. When you leave, they're not just mourning your presence, they're unraveling. Not because you broke them, but because they never built themselves fully without you. This is the essence of shadow work. Not just seeing what you denied in yourself, but confronting the parts of you that only existed through someone else. You triggered that process by stepping away. And even if they never admit it, your distance became a sacred mirror. One they can't escape. One that demands evolution or emotional collapse. What they miss isn't just you. It's who they were when you were around. That version of themselves that felt grounded, needed, significant. Your presence anchored something in them, something they didn't even realize was fragile until you stepped away. And now, every memory becomes a quiet reckoning, not just of what they lost, but of what they depended on, without ever questioning why. Some begin to feel haunted by questions that never found answers. Was I too much, not enough? These aren't about you. They are fragments of the identity they tied to your validation. And now, without that mirror, they wander through the ruins of assumptions, searching for meaning where once there was comfort. They're not grieving you. They're grieving the version of themselves that doesn't know how to stand alone. You didn't take anything from them. You simply stopped giving what was never yours to hold, the burden of their emotional stability. And in doing so, you invited them, through pain, into their own healing. But healing is never immediate. First comes resistance, then blame, and only after a long silence, reflection. There's irony in how people blame the one who walks away, when in truth, that departure was often an act of self-preservation. It's easier for them to accuse you of abandonment than to admit they built their peace upon borrowed strength. And yet deep down, some part of them knows they weren't ready to hold themselves. Each time you detach from someone who projected their worth onto you, you offer them a chance to meet themselves. Not through comfort, but through collapse. And sometimes, it's that collapse that awakens something ancient, the soul's longing to stand whole. Eventually, your absence stops being a presence, it becomes a force, a quiet tremor that unsettles the emotional structure they once called home. They thought you were just a chapter, a moment. But the truth is, you were a pillar. And without that pillar, the walls start to bend. Not all at once, but slowly, painfully, until what they built around you can no longer stand. This is why your decision to step away causes more than sadness. It causes disorientation. They don't know where to place the feelings, the habits, the expectations. It's not just a gap in routine, it's a gap in identity. Because every relationship, whether they admit it or not, is a negotiation of meaning. And when you remove yourself, they must rewrite that meaning. Most aren't ready. Some seek distraction, others seek replacements, but none of it fits. Because it wasn't you they needed. It was what you represented: safety, familiarity, emotional gravity. And that's not something easily replaced, especially when it was given freely, yet never fully appreciated until it was gone. But here's the deeper mystery. In your absence, some begin to transform. Not all, but a few. The bravest. The ones who stop blaming and start looking inward. And it's through that internal chaos that a new kind of clarity emerges, one that was never possible while you were still holding their weight. So if you ever doubt the impact of walking away, remember this: you didn't create the storm, you revealed it. Your choice was the crack in the mask, and everything that followed was truth spilling out. Uncomfortable, yes, but necessary. For them, and for you. They may never say it out loud, but your absence taught them more than your presence ever could. Not because you weren't enough, but because they never truly listened while you were near. Only through distance do some begin to hear the echoes of your presence, the weight of your silence, the meaning behind your withdrawal. And in those echoes, truth begins to form, raw, unfiltered, undeniable. Some will resist the lesson. They'll drown in blame, create stories to justify their discomfort. But others, they'll pause. They'll remember the look in your eyes before you left, the quiet ache behind your patience, and they'll begin to realize your leaving wasn't cruelty. It was courage, the kind that few understand until they're forced to confront their own emotional scaffolding. And you're not untouched by this. Walking away was never easy. It required you to choose solitude over validation, peace over pleasing, alignment over attachment. It demanded that you look in the mirror and say, "I choose me." And that simple choice, though quiet on the outside, shifted entire landscapes within you. Every step away from what no longer honors your spirit is a return to the divine within. It's a remembering, a rerouting. What they feel in your absence is not abandonment. It's the spiritual severing of dependency. And though it may wound, it also plants the seed of inner power. So take this moment and breathe. You are not the villain in someone else's unfinished story. You are the beginning of your own sacred chapter, and your silence, it's not empty, it's a doorway. In the quiet aftermath, something sacred begins, not for all, but for the ones who truly choose to look inward. Your departure, once seen as abandonment, becomes initiation. They begin to see that what broke wasn't you, but the illusion they held about what connection meant. And in that breaking, if they're brave enough, healing begins. Not the kind that clings, but the kind that liberates. You became a catalyst, a sacred interruption. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do for someone's soul is to stop being their shield. When you step away, you offer them the chance to stand without leaning, to feel without projecting, to grow without depending. It's painful, it's powerful, and it's deeply spiritual. And for you? You discover something profound. You were never meant to carry what others refused to face. Your light was never meant to be dimmed to make others feel safe. By stepping away, you step toward truth, and though they may never thank you, some part of them will always know you gave them exactly what they needed, space to meet themselves. So if you're still holding guilt, release it. If you're still questioning whether your silence was justified, remember this. Sometimes growth looks like absence. Sometimes love looks like letting go. And sometimes, the highest version of yourself can only emerge when you finally stop shrinking to fit the expectations of those who never saw your full light. And now, as this journey nears its end, I invite you. Subscribe to this channel if these words touched your truth. Here we go beyond the surface, we speak the language of the soul, and if you're ready for more revelations, more healing, and more of your true self, don't just walk away, walk forward. The next video is waiting, and it holds something your spirit is ready to hear.